This whole thing is really just a test of my prompting skills. Okay, it's getting closer. Cool. So he was able to create the prompt messages. And so with this, we just get a name and with the name, we'll just return the specific prompt. Okay, so let's review. That looks right. Okay, so now we have resources. Now we have prompts. Let's go back to our plan. Let's see. Okay, so make prompts dynamic. I'm not going to get the LLM to struggle through this one. But essentially, when we make a call to get the prompts, so right now you're looking at these, they're just static prompts. You can kind of with that, um, you can kind of just move it into your um, front end. And so it's like, why do you need to have this like dynamic functionality? Or sorry, why do you need this like static prompts? Like what good is that? And so it starts to get really interesting when you start creating these system prompts dynamically with some information passed in. So it could even be like user ID, and then you can fetch some user preferences to create a system prompt based off of like some type of like information. So in this case, I'm just going to copy in the final product here. And so I'm going to install these. These are just uh, utilities to help parse Markdown. And so what I'm doing now is I'm passing the name and I'm passing some arguments. The argument includes the note content. So in this prompt for summarized note, I can analyze the markdown, pull some information out of it, and give the user a system prompt. And I'm going to show what this all looks like practically, like when you're using it in a front end in a few minutes. And then same thing with brainstorm ideas. We can take some like topics, note content, all this stuff to generate a dynamic prompt here. Cool. So this is, I'm going to bring in the front end app. And I wonder, it'll be actually easier to just move over to the other repo and run that. Okay, so I'm gonna have to bump this up. And how are we doing with it? Any questions so far that people have been asking that I
Yeah,
maybe should pause here for a second?
yeah, I'm answering some in the chat. One question, possibly insane or naive question. Is there a pattern for an LLM lending its brain to an MCP? So the MCP can use the client's LLM to think and do stuff. So the answer is I don't think that's possible. Typically it's for the
So
LLM. Go
I'm
ahead.
gonna so it is possible. So there's a part of the MCP spec called sampling, which is essentially this. This is not something that we support yet, and a lot of clients don't actually a lot of clients and servers don't actually uh like server frameworks don't actually support it yet. It's still one of like as you were talking earlier, Shane, there's a lot of this MCP stuff is cutting edge. And because the users of MCP and the creators of MCP servers are still kind of in the earlier stages. So tools is kind of what most people are interested in. People are kind of dipping their toes into like resources and prompts now, but then you get more advanced things like sampling. And so essentially what sampling is uh, the MCP server can send a prompt to the LLM and say, hey, can you run this prompt for me and give me the response? And so because MCP doesn't have any kind of like LLM attached to it, doesn't have any like API keys attached to it. And so it's a way of basically doing that, like hijacking the the client's agent or LLM to like do some kind of like task. So it could be like you get all this context and then the MCP server says like, whoa, that's a lot of like context. Can you take this whole blob, summarize it for me, and then I'll run like the MCP tools on it or like whatever I was going to run.
So that I learned something new today because I didn't know that that was part of the spec yet. So that's
Yeah.
cool. You could also, of course, especially in Mastra, have an agent that runs in your MCP server. So you could use your own LLM, right? If especially if it was like a streamable HTTP, but that might not be what you want. So sounds like Nate, to answer your question, like it technically is possible, but the support isn't maybe completely there yet, but it likely will be over time.
I think something's running on this port. And I realized I actually made some changes. I was pointing to the deployed version. So 1 second, I'm just going to fix that.
All right, this will be so for those of you that maybe have jumped in late, we are building an MCP server with Mastra. We have added a tool, we added resources, and now we just added prompts to this MCP server. So those are three parts of the spec. And then we are now, kind of moment of truth, going to start to see it actually take place. So we spent a lot of time just looking at code, but now
Mhm.
it's going to start to come together a bit more.
So I'm running my MCP server in this window. I'm going to run my agent that the front end's going to interact with. Okay, let me just restart this. Oh, because it's trying to connect to the wrong port again. Okay, let's try this one more time. Okay, running my agent. Still. Okay, maybe I'll just run it from the cloud playground. Let's see if it's happier with that. Okay, and then let me run the front end. So before this workshop, I went and hosted the MCP server in uh, in Master Cloud, and so I have this endpoint here. So that's what I'm using in the code right now. And we have this. This will look very familiar if you're familiar with the playground. It should. Oh, we're trying to get parity with it or parity for the most part, and it looks like we're this looks very familiar to what we were using it or showing in the playground earlier. So
Yeah,
if I
so
go,
essentially all you did there, Daniel, was you basically created a Git repo and pushed it up to Master Cloud, so it's live rather than just running on your machine.
yeah, exactly. And so I'm not using like this local version here. I have this version here, which is a mono repo of my MCP server, my notes, and my notes are like my fake database, and then my front end application. And so this is what we'll share the Git repo for this after. And so this is what you'll have to like play around with. And so let's take a look at our application. Okay, and it's not pulling up the notes here. Something with, let me just try to fix this quick.
Live demos. And if you do have any questions as we're trying to fix this issue, please drop them in the chat. Um,
Let me see, maybe I don't need to clone it and I can just, I think we
yes.
might have had a fix recently that we no longer need to do that.
And there was a question, so in the live example, you're using Zod to model the tool. Does Mastra support standard schema? I think we support Zod, and you can also use maybe JSON schema, I think, if that's right. I don't know. But we're big we're fans of Zod, so you can use Zod. I don't know if we actually technically support standard schema, so I'm not that familiar with what that is.
Okay, this seems to always fun doing a live demo. Um, Let me try to get it just working locally again instead.
The live demo never quite goes to plan.
Let's see what was, okay, so it should be this. Let me just make sure I don't have any lingering processes. PMPM. Okay, that's looking good. Let's hope this all. Okay, so I have my MCP server here, and then my agent running in my front end, and fingers crossed. There we go. Okay, so now it's pulling in my resources. So I just have this notes app where I have an agent that you can talk to alter the notes here. And so um, what we kind of like went through what prompts can look like. So um, if I type a slash here, I get this list of prompts I can choose. So let's go with new daily note. And so it's going to give me a prompt here to get started.
So that's
Let's send
essentially
that.
so that's essentially a template then.
Yeah, exactly. So we got an error here. Let's try that again.
Getting failed to
Oh,
get
there
API.
might have been a when I didn't install, there might have been a new version. I'm using Copilot Kit to render this UI here. Let's see
We
if
are for those of you that are still here, we are coming up on time, so we might go. Maybe we'll go a minute or two late to try to get this thing working, but understand if you do have to drop, the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel. You'll get an email too in a few hours that'll have links to all this stuff. So you can see the result and you'll be able to pull down the code and actually try it out yourself.
okay, so Copilot Kit is having an issue. Maybe I did need this, so I'm just going to revert that and see if that fixes it. I'll try once more, then just kind of walk through um, what the intention was. It might not be so interesting watching me sit here and debug this. Okay, fingers crossed. Okay, let's see what happens. Let's do new note. Oh, the error didn't pop up right away. So it created my new note. So there's some things still not quite working with this. I'm not going to fix them right now because we're at time. But I'll just walk you through quickly what the intention was. So with resources, um, let me just find my MCP server. So with resources, there's a way to communicate between server and client. So uh, you can, an MCP server has these two um, functions on them, basically notifications that you send to the client. So when your resources list change, so let's say you like change some metadata about a resource or delete or create a resource, you'd want to send this notification. Or if the content of a specific resource changes, then you want to send this notification. And so this is the MCP side of things. And so the client itself has to uh, respond to that notification. So if I look at how uh, the client is set up here, so we get this client, we point it to our MCP server. So we give it a URL, we give it an ID, so it doesn't need to recreate the client every single time. It can reuse client. So you can imagine that the ID for the client would probably be like a user ID if lots of users are using your application. So it doesn't need to recreate the client for every single user. And then these two is basically uh, registering a handler. So when the resource list changes, we can do some sort of action. So in this case, I'm just emitting an event saying the resources or the notes have changed. And then we can also set this handler for uh, when a specific content of a resource changes. And so what this looks like, so if I look at where I'm actually handling this, um, I have this API route here, so it's just listening to this, and when it receives that, it'll send the message to my front end. So my front end can react uh, uh, responsively to like the resources changing. And so you can imagine if you have a whole team of people working on something, um, when somebody changes a resource, your client would also get a notification if you've subscribed. And so there's one last thing. A client can subscribe to updates from a specific resource or unsubscribe to it. So it kind of like completes the cycle of just making sure that a given client is always up to date on like what the resource is. So you imagine if you're like editing a page, you'd probably want, and that page is using some sort of resource, you probably want to subscribe to that resource with the client that you're using and just get real-time updates there.
Awesome. Well, we do need to wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for those that have joined. I will encourage you all to check the recording and stay tuned to your email. We'll send you the GitHub link so you can actually dig through the code. I know we went through a lot of stuff really fast and had a few little hiccups along the way, but taking a look at the code might make a lot of it clearer of how it all works and pulling it down and getting it set up locally so you can actually run this thing and see how you can spin up your own MCP servers and get it working with your own Mastra agents as well. So thank you all for attending. Any parting words, Daniel? Anything else that you want to close up on?
Oh, I guess we should share the URL for the workshop here. I'll post it
Right.
in the chat.
Yeah, I did drop the GitHub link once, but we should drop it again. And for those of you that are, if you're still here, if you haven't already, please do go to the Mastra GitHub and give us a star. We appreciate that. Please follow or check out our Discord if you do have questions. That's the best place to go to talk to others on the team. Where a lot of us are in there, quite a bit most days, just chatting, answering questions, trying to help out. So let us know how we can help, and we hope to see you at a future workshop. All
Great.
right.
Thank you.
See y'all
Bye.
later.